So see, says Moses to the people of Israel. That's the way the Torah portion begins. He says, I place before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing that will come when they fulfill God's commandments, and the curse if they abandon them. These should be proclaimed on two different mountains, Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, when the holy people cross over into the Holy Land. Okay, so this is Moses puts out and says that especially they're going into Israel and they're going to be facing the trials and tribulations of life, and things were very different in the desert, where they had minimal things to do and choices to make. It says here, you're going to make. I want you to choose a successful life, and God gives you that sense of autonomy. Let me just see if this is an extra one. There we go. Thank you. All right. A temple should be established. He's talking now because they've had for 39 years in the desert, they've had the tabernacle, which is mobile, collapsible mini temple. And he's saying, since you're going to Israel, eventually you should make a permanent temple in the place that God will choose to make his name. In other words, God will tell you where to do it. The people should bring their offerings to him, and it's forbidden to make offerings to God in any other place. It's permitted to slaughter animals elsewhere, not as sacrifices to eat their meat, but to eat their meat. The blood which in the temple is poured upon the altar, however, may not be eaten. As really a total aside to today's conversation, it is interesting and helpful to note that in this Torah portion, when Moses talks to the Jews about slaughtering meat for food, he says, slaughter it the way I commanded you to. And which means, refer to what book, chapter, verse. There is nowhere in the Torah that Moses tells us the details of how to slaughter, to do what we call shechita, proper kosher slaughter. So we got two choices. Either we say, oops, he forgot to put it in, or we say, not everything that Moses commanded us is explicit in the written Torah. And therefore, this is one of the ways when we talk about the Talmud, the oral law, it's not a bunch of rabbis coming afterwards and adding on to the Torah. It's Moses taught. Moses explained, he gave us written laws, and then he gave us an explanation and an amplification. And some of the things are not in there, but they were either carried traditionally or they're carried orally. I mean, they were carried orally, and then later on, many of them made their ways into the Talmud. So, for example, if you're familiar with on Sukkot, we use an esrog. Looks like a lemon, a citron. Nowhere in the Torah does it say the word esrog or the word tefillin, for example. Moses, what it says there, for whatever reasons, the Talmud explains why the verb is using, but Jews have always been using esrog. The term for esrog in the Torah is the fruit of a nice tree, which is just, take your pick, it depends what you like. And we've always used only an esrog because Moses told us this was an esrog. And why the language was fruit of a nice tree is something which we're not going to get into now. But all of these things, it's clear from the Torah itself that Moses commanded us things to do that are important for life that are not explicit here in the Torah. Right? Yes, explicitly fleshed out in the Torah. Okay, a false prophet or one who entices others to worship idols should be put to death. And the idolatrous city must be destroyed. The identifying signs of kosher animals and fish and the list of non-kosher birds, first given in Leviticus 11, are repeated. A tenth of all produce is to be eaten in Jerusalem or else exchanged for money. There's a lot of stuff, and that's Steve Applebaum has been focusing on all the mining the individual mitzvahs. I'm not going to do it today, but there's so much to talk about here. Whether which food is purchased and eaten there. In recent years, this tithe is given to the poor instead. In certain years, this tithe is given to the poor instead. Firstborn cattle and sheep are to be offered in the temple, and their meat eaten by the Kohen and the priests. The mitzvah of charity obligates a Jew to aid a needy fellow with a gift or a loan. In a way, a loan is even better than a gift because with a loan, they're able to do what they need to do and maintain the self-respect. On the sabbatical year, occurring every 7th year, all loans are to be forgiven. All indentured servants are to be set free after 6 years of service. Our parasha Torah portion concludes with the laws of the 3 pilgrimage festivals, Passover, Shavuos, and Sukkot, when all should go to see and be seen before God in the Holy Temple. Okay, now we're going to talk about something which is not mentioned here at all. But just, you got your Reader's Digest version, so you know what to expect with the Torah reading this coming Shabbos. We're going to talk about one detail here where it says, do not, and we're going to, it'll be a text one, but actually, I'll show that first, and then we'll talk a little bit. Sorry. Hello. Okay. One of the Torah portions, the mitzvahs in this week's Torah portion is, God says, everything I'm commanding you, be careful to fulfill it. Do not add to it, and do not subtract from it. Not subtract from it means that makes sense. So you keep the laws. But what happens if someone says, Shabbos is nice, I want to do it Wednesday too. Passover in the spring was nice. We'll do that. We'll do it in the fall. We're going to add to it. We'll build on it. Moses says, don't subtract, don't add. There's a precision to the formula of Torah. And that's what we're going to talk about today. In Torah life, there is, when one looks from the outside, I'm going to say from the sidelines of Jewish observance, there's a lot of minutia and a lot of attention to detail in religious observant life, which can look excessive, curious, religious OCD. I mean, there are different ways of looking at it, and I understand that. And just as something of an aside to that, I don't have an appreciation for wine. Not at this point in my life, it's not my thing. I know a lot of people who have a lot of appreciation for wine, and one specifically who moved out, a good friend, Mel, come to my house Friday night, and he had different size glasses, and I mean, it was a whole operation of what he was doing, and he had his own wine cellar. It was a very big deal to me. Grape juice is fine. I'll take wine if it's sweet, Snapple, whatever. But it's not. I'm just not my thing. I was together with my friend Mel in Israel, and we went to visit the Golan Winery. And the person presenting said, "This one has hints of blueberry and apricot or something like that." And I said, "Radek, that sounds good." And I tasted it, and it was a dry wine or whatever. It wasn't for me. And I said, "No, this is this. What apricot? What blueberry? This is." So he said, "I said, I don't get it." He said, "Well, you need to cultivate an appreciation for it, to drink more." I said, "I drink every Friday night." He says, "Nah, you gulp, you don't drink." So it struck me then, and I've mentioned it over the years. It struck me then that I see him with his wine rituals, kind of like people see me with some of my mitzvahs. It's like, what are you doing? I understand that there's a whole world of wine that makes a lot of sense to people who understand it. And he's opening up all the flavors for him, and there's a method it's not math. It's a method to this, a methodology that makes sense. I just don't get that that side of the coin, because I don't have the taste. I don't know what it means. I don't know what they're accessing. Someone seeing me, with my matzah or whatever else it is, not I mean, matzah and Pesach, I mean, but whenever that, with my mitzvahs, they don't say, "What are you doing? There's a great God out there. What does this have to do with that?" These minutiae. And at one level, what I would often say to people using this, say, "Listen, it's like the wine. You got to figure out, get the taste, and you understand that there's a certain way to access it." we're going to talk about that today a little bit, even beyond the access. Is just to say, what is the mitzvah about? Because it is, and I think there's a graphic here. See, this graphic is someone with an esrog. When it comes this year in October, you go into Jewish communities everywhere, and people are going to be buying an esrog for sukkahs. You think you walk in, you buy an esrog. An esrog, the beauty of the esrog and how the fruit is and how it looks and how it grows and the blemishes is important in Jewish law. It's supposed to be the fruit of a nice tree, right? It's supposed to be, there's a beauty to it, a beautiful tree. So people literally go with these, I guess the jewelers, I forget what it's called again.
A loop.
Looking at the esrog to see a lot of imperfections. For me, it's a bit excessive, but I get it. But the question is, why? What do I get? Is it just because it's their shtick? Why are the little tiny details in the mitzvah so important? And if you look and say, okay, our point of departure is our limited physical life. Then there's this infinite God out there. In our thinking, you want to approach an infinite God, it's with expansiveness, it's with love, it's with singing, it's with freedom from all the little details. And it's
Yes and no.
okay.
Okay, in the example of the esrog, the guy is examining for the question of kosher versus treif.
No. It's a kosher esrog. It'd be a kosher esrog anyway.
If it's at all scarred.
No. He's looking for more. I guarantee you, before he took the loop, he saw that's a kosher esrog. That's a kosher esrog. I can see from here it's a kosher esrog. Now, because he wants to do it in a premium way. I was like, God bless him. But what is it? What's his mindset? Do you want to continue what you're saying?
Well, I mean, if he's examining it, he's looking for imperfections.
Correct, but not kosher treif. He could use that mitzvah. He knows he can use that mitzvah, and he'll do it and make the blessing and do the mitzvah.
But if there are imperfections,
it's not as
wouldn't
beautiful.
That be analogous to torn or treif?
No. It's the difference between what we would call a mitzvah and doing a mitzvah in a beautiful way. But it's a mitzvah. So there's kosher, and then there's a little more super kosher. But then the treif is on the other side of it. Okay.
I know I have relatives like that.
And you have a friend like that. So the idea is that what I want to get into here is the mindset. It's for someone who's spiritual, someone who believes in this infinite being out there, and we call God or call whatever you want to call mom, God, this supreme being, infinite. It's hard to see to how being so focused on little details is going to connect you with the infinite. And first of all, OCD, religious OCD, is a real thing, but I think it is. Trust me. But the things maybe I think that to someone it might appear that way when it's not, because it's like, what are you getting hung up on that? It works, what are you so worried about? So let's look at this. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the. Oops.
So if he found an imperfection in the esrog, then what?
So if you found the imperfection in the esrog, he's going to have to figure out. You're talking correctly. I don't know who that guy is, but for that type of person, he's going to say, okay, this is what it is. Now, how much is this? Because esrogs can go for $700, $800, $900, or $50. So he's looking for the nicest one he can afford. He's going to get an esrog.
Oh, so that's not. He doesn't have ownership of that yet.
Oh no, he's definitely in a, and you can see someone behind him with holding two esrogs or three. He's in an esrog store, and people spend hours there.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. I'm actually a more easier sell on that one, but I do understand and I can respect it. Okay. So this is, 1 second, this is text 2. This is a question posed to a Chabad guy in Australia, Rabbi Aaron Moss. And the question was, why does the religion seem to obsess over seemingly insignificant details? How much matzah we have to eat? Which spoon did I use for milk and which for meat? Which is the right way to tie my shoelaces? Because there actually is a right way to tie your shoelaces. It seems to me that this misses the bigger picture by focusing on minutia. Is this nitpicking what Jews call spirituality? Then in parentheses, I actually already sent you this question over a week ago and didn't receive a reply. Could it be that you have finally been asked a question and you can't answer? We'll get back to the answer at the end. Okay. Now this is text 3. We're going to address what I call the religious OCD. This is actually before I go. This is written. There was a great Hasidic master known as Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. Pretty well known. You go to Israel, a lot of Breslovers around. And the writings that we have from him are written from a student who taught what Rabbi Nachman spoke about. Rabbi Nachman, his writings reveal in him a lot of deep spirituality, but a lot of what we would call normal human psychological internal turbulence, both with his mood. And one of the things was that he seems to have had a certain type of religious OCD for a while that he spoke about. This one is focusing on something in that we're very careful about our bodies. We're very careful about how we deal with our own waste. And it's actually, by Jewish law, it's prohibited, if possible, to hold back on expelling waste. It's not good for the system. And one of the things, that's in general, just respect your body, listen to your body, and let your body do what it needs to do. One of the things, not directly on that, but related to it, it says that when we pray, before we pray, we should kind of internally check how we're doing. If we need to go to the bathroom before, so it doesn't disrupt you later. And also, it's just not a great feeling. So, getting up in the morning, one of the things is we want to try and we want to pray earlier than later, and ideally want to make sure that we're in a good shape intestinally. Let's call it that. So here, this is written by Rabbi Nachman's primary student. It says there are many who would spend much time in the lavatory. He's writing this in the 1800s. There are many who would spend much time in the lavatory, meaning the outhouse, attempting to totally cleanse out their bodies before praying in the morning. The Rebbe, meaning Rabbi Nachman, spoke out strongly and ridiculed this practice. He said that the main thing to remember is that the Torah was not given to the ministering angels. It is not necessary to go beyond the requirement of the law. And the codes state only that it's forbidden to pray when one actually feels the need to relieve themselves. You feel the need to relieve yourself, and then pray. Even in a situation where a person really does need to relieve themselves, what happens if you're on an airplane and it's time to pray and there's a long line by the bathroom? There are many laws cited in Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, especially dealing with emergencies when one has no other choice. From all this, we see that there's no need to be overly strict in this respect. Chill out a little bit. One should not keep oneself from prayer and study just for the sake of a mere qualm, which in itself is unnecessary strictness and foolishness. There has to be balance. We value the law and then understand the nuances of the law and be a little bit sophisticated about how you see it. The best thing is to pray as soon as you wake up in the morning. If you can easily attend to your needs, then do so. But if not, pray immediately. Even if you have a slight sensation in your bowels, it can be ignored. We shouldn't seek out such disciplines and depressing measures, as such matters are not for our time. Because people would go to great lengths because they want to be totally cleansed in time for prayers. They just don't go to, don't eat prunes and all, whatever you need to do. Just be normal. The Rebbe himself, I mean Rebbe Nachman, had made this error in his youth. He was a very zealous young man, wanted to do everything 110%. He did many unusual things to achieve bodily purity. He went so far that he endangered his health and even his life. Finally, he realized it was foolishness and a waste of precious time. This thing written by a very religious man here about a very religious man saying that sometimes you can go overboard with religion too. We're not talking about that. Even without going overboard, there is a certain amount that is the right amount for matzah. There is a certain amount, there is a time to light Shabbos candles. And there's a time when you should no longer light Shabbos candles. And someone says, oh, come on, it's only, I missed it by a minute, Rabbi. Let me just light, it's such an important mitzvah. What's the big deal? It actually is a big deal. Details matter. You don't want to be crazy about it, but details do matter. So now let's get into the idea of how we see mitzvahs from a more deeper mystical, the place of mitzvahs in life. Instead of seeing mitzvahs as these human exercises we do to somehow draw down the infinite, in other words, we're looking at things from the outside in, let's look from the inside out. God created the world. God gave us mitzvahs. What's God's intent? So, first thing, and this is from there are a few quotes here from a very famous, very, very famous book, actually, a series of discourses that went on for over a year, but it's all put together, it's all one flow, of the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. From 1906, 5766, and that's it's very well known. Here he says like this: the desire in mitzvot is connected to God's innermost essence, higher even than God's desire to create the universe. So let's just step back a second. God is God. God is infinite. God is doing fine because God's God. Then God says, I want to have a world and beings who feel themselves independent. Why do I want them to feel independent? Why do I need that? Because I want those people to create a reunion with me. I want someone to love me. But first, there's got to be a someone. I want people who will have a life that does not shout God, where they see priorities that are not about God, it's about a hot dog or a car. And then they're going to say, no, I want a connection with God. I want to embrace God in my life. I'm not leaving the hot dog and the car because those are a part of life, but I want to bring God into my life and maybe use the things that I have, the limited, the material things and kind of shallow things that I have to bring God into my life, into my world. So God needs two things. God needs a world, and then God needs a mechanism for us to be able to connect to it. It's God's world, but God creates a bridge, a way where we can bring the infinite into a finite world. So the desire in mitzvahs, which are that mitzvahs, the word mitzvah itself, it means a commandment, but in the Aramaic version of the word, it means a bond. It's a way we connect with God. Mm-hmm. So God gives us this bonding mechanism where we as finite human beings living in finite lives, which we should stay as part of finite lives because it's finite, we should be able to bring the infinite into our lives. That God's desire in that is even higher than God's desire to create the universe, because the universe was only a reason. It was a setting where we could bring the infinite God into our lives. The only reason God needs a world is because that's the setting in which we will operate, and we will make choices, and we're not forced to be close to God, and we decide to be close to God. Although the desire to create the universe is also a deep desire, it is limited. Insofar as God's desire to create the universe is ultimately a desire that he should be drawn into the universe within the finite confines of the universe. God wants it, gave us this setting, gave us this finite world that we're all living in, finite lives. And then the idea was that we should specifically lead finite lives, But then the desire God manifested in mitzvahs, on the other hand, is that he should be drawn down without any limitation whatsoever. That we should have God's essence, infinite essence. Rather, just as he exists above, he should become present below, to bring God's presence into our lives. Now, that's through mitzvahs. Now you could say, well, where do you see the infinite? You know, I made a blessing on this seltzer before. That's a mitzvah. And the heavens didn't open up. There wasn't this revelation of the infinite. But what Torah tells me is that by doing that, I opened my life up to God. I connected with the infinite, but my sensors can't feel the infinite. But I brought my soul connected to the infinite. And after 120 years, my soul's going to recognize that. And when Mashiach will come today, we're all going to recognize the infinite presence we brought into the world with all our mitzvahs. Right now, we're still living in a very finite, narrow way of approaching the world where we see only surface reality. Just like we don't see the atoms in a table, I don't see the atoms in this can of seltzer. I don't see the spirituality that I brought into it into my life when I made the bracha, the blessing, but believe in it. And because God's ultimate goal was that we draw the infinite into the finite. And here's another graphic. The mitzvahs are the core of God's being. Each mitzvah represents God's desire to draw his infinite essence down into this world. Okay. So now we're going to go take this further. Text 5. Now, this is continuing with Rabbi Shalom Beres, page 69. Now, mitzvahs are also limited. Mitzvahs are not infinite. You light a Shabbos candle, it's a candle, and it's not infinite. It's very finite, and it's a piece of the world, and the fire is obviously infinite. It's not is finite, and it's going to go out soon. All mitzvahs have certain limitations under which they can be formed. Like I said, light Shabbos candles is this time. If you light a Shabbos candle today, you light a candle. You can make all the blessings you want. It's not a Shabbos candle because it's not Shabbos. If I put on tefillin, we put on tefillin there, and I just, there's supposed to be 4 scrolls in the headpiece, and I take out one and say, okay, it's got 3 batteries, not 4. It doesn't work. It doesn't follow the prescription. For example, tefillin have to be made of 4 scrolls and 4 compartments in the head tefillin and 1 compartment in the hand tefillin. Moreover, there are many detailed laws regarding the manner of writing the scrolls. It's a very, very complex process, and manufacturing the boxes and putting them on. Likewise, tzitzis have to be made in a specific manner. Every mitzvah has to be done in a specific manner. Likewise, tzitzis have to be, the sukkah cannot be smaller than 7 tefachim. A tefach is a handbreadth. It's about a tefach is about a little over 1.5 inches. No, and yeah, and meters? I'm sorry. Meters. It's a 3. No, it's 3.1 inches would be a tefach, and no taller than 20 amas, which is about a little over a foot and a half. All these measurements, these are Talmudic measurements. All these measurements and specifications come from the supernal desire, meaning that God desires that I can translate it into meters, but I don't use meters. Meaning that God desires that the mitzvahs be transformed specifically in this way. This translates to limitations in the divine light. For when the mitzvahs were formed formed as specified, the light is drawn down. If not, it isn't. So there are boundaries. You light a Shabbos candle, keep it simple, it has to be in this slot of time, and it should last at least whatever, half an hour, and we make a blessing, and it's cosmic. But you did it on a Tuesday, it's not. It has to be within ramifications. But however, that doesn't mean the fact that it's limited in its application doesn't mean that the light, the godliness that comes in is limited. And let's look at text 6. In truth, this limitation is not a limitation of the light itself, meaning it does not determine how much light can be drawn down. We'll talk about this more. I just want to get through some of the text. How much light can be drawn on, or whether it'll be more or less intense. After all, essential of infinite light is not subject to such terms. It's God's essence. Rather, the limitations of mitzvahs determine only how the light, the unchanging infinite light, is drawn down. If the mitzvahs are performed in the precise way, then the light is drawn down. For that is how God decided he wants his light to be accessed. This is not because the precise details of the mitzvahs have any inherent qualities that enable them to access God's light. Rather, because God decided that should be this way. If we're doing from the inside out, we're thinking how God says. God says, I want a material, limited, finite universe with people who have their own weaknesses and they're physical and they are very finite. And I want to give them opportunities to access my infinite essence. And I'm going to do it. God, the infinite, I'm going to give them precise
Values.
values is fine, but precise ways of being able to draw the infinite into their lives. It's, if we're looking from outside in, we'll call it, say, what does lighting a flame, how's that bring the infinite? Because lighting a flame doesn't bring the infinite, unless God says it does. So it's not about that we think that lighting a flame brings the infinite, and therefore light a flame and it'll bring the infinite. Lighting a flame is just a flame. Tefillin, it's animal hide. A mezuzah, it's animal hide and ink. What makes you think that animal hide and ink is somehow the combination to bring godliness in the world, the infinite? That sounds crazy. Unless we say, well, God said, I want to give you myself. And if you have a piece of parchment and precisely written words, and you make a blessing, yeah, that's how I'm going to be present in your home. We didn't make it up. It's God, the infinite, saying, here's how I'm going to share myself. So it's very important to, and that's very much the point of this discussion. We can't judge mitzvahs from the outside in, because then the details don't make sense. We say this is how God has determined that God would share the divine infinity, and said, but I'm giving you as limited human beings, I'm giving you finite ways to do it. So whatever you say, boss.
How come God doesn't give you, like, if that's what God wants you to do, how come he doesn't give you that information sooner? Like, you grew up with it, so you knew there was, you grew up and you knew there were 613 mitzvot.
Yeah.
I found out about that a year ago. So
Welcome aboard.
and it was like, that's such a specific number. I
Yeah.
thought there were 10.
Yeah.
So if this, I mean, I'm assuming that's up to him, whether or not you're even aware of it.
For sure. So what God's true. So in God's management plan, I'm not a part of management here, I'm sales. What he does is says, I'm going to create the people. I want to see, first of all, the first people knew of God, then kind of forgot, but people always were looking for something higher. When Abraham and Sarah searched for this invisible monotheistic creator God as opposed to the idols, eventually God said, reached out to them, and they were already older, but they were plugging away of their own volition, saying, you got something here, and I want you to start to create this idea of belief in a good, invisible master God. And eventually what they were doing was they were spreading the idea, just the general idea of this of God, as opposed to not a God you have to be afraid of, and God's fighting with each other. This is a God who loves us and created us out of love, and wants us to take care of each other. Then it took us to Sinai, and God spoke to them and said, here's what I'm doing. I'm giving you a program for life. I'm giving you a program, a Torah, that through which you will be able to bring me, the infinite God, into your lives every day, as much as you want. I'm giving you a down payment of 10 mitzvahs, but Moses is going to come up the mountain for 40 days, and he's going to come down with the whole enchilada. You're going to give you the whole program. And that a lot was oral, but we knew in the desert, we knew Lulav and Esrog, we knew Sukkah, we knew all of those things because that's what was taught to us. So God did give us that through Moses, and standing at Sinai, God says, I'm talking to Moses. I'm talking to Moses in front of you because you're a bunch of Jews who are very skeptical, because humans are skeptical and Jews are even worse. And I want you to know that I'm God. And if I say you can trust Moses, trust him. Don't give me this whole game of telephone thing. Trust him when what he says. Okay, so God's in charge, so fine. So God's guaranteeing me that when Moses says something, it has veracity. That was where God created that bridge of saying, I'm giving you this Torah, and that's why the Torah is called sometimes like a ketubah. That's what bonded us. It's that bridge God enabled. So we do have that. We need to access it, but part of it, and what we're talking about here, is it does have a lot of minutia. But the minutia is not what we decided as a way to approach the infinite. How can I possibly figure out about to grab the infinite? The infinite is beyond me. God's God. I'm just a guy, a small guy. This is the prescription that God gave us. God says, through this, you will be mine and you will have me. I don't know. Did we read 6 yet? I don't know. I'll read the second paragraph again just because I just don't remember. Rather, the limitations of mitzvah determine only how the light, the unchanging infinite light, is drawn down. If the mitzvahs are performed in the precise way, then the light is drawn down, for that is how God decided he wants his light to be accessed. This is not because the precise details of the mitzvahs have any inherent quality to do it that enable them to access God's light, but rather because God decided that it should be this way. So, take this to 7a, which is on 71. We are obligated to perform the mitzvahs in a precise manner only because that is how God decided the mitzvahs should be performed. This is not our invention. If God's will was that we should chop wood or something similar, we would chop wood. If God had said that Sunday mornings chopping wood outside is what the way for me to access the infinite, I'll be outside with an axe, maybe before class, after class, but there'll be something, because what do I know? I wouldn't have thought of that myself, but I'm not the boss. If God's will, the limitations of the mitzvahs that God's will assumes, and that's actually a Talmudic quote. If we had been commanded to chop wood, we'd be chopping wood. The limitations of the mitzvahs that God's will assumes a specific form and excludes other forms are not for any fathomable reason. Rather, they're simply there because God willed that it should be so. Consequently, there's no limitation in the light itself. The limitation is only how the light is accessed. The light itself remains God's essential infinite light, which we are bringing into our lives. We're finite, so it's kind of hidden from us because it would overwhelm us, and we don't have sensors for it, but it's there, and God willing, one way or another, we're going to know it. Here's a graphic. It says a mitzvah is limited because it is a physical means that God created through which we can fulfill his will and draw down his infinite God light. The action itself isn't important. The fact that it's God will makes this significant. That's really important. Say, lighting a Shabbos candle is very important. Not because lighting candles is important, but because God said, if you do this on Friday night, that's important to me. Okay, if it's important to you, it's important to me. We didn't just come up with these ideas. It's because we have no way of figuring out how to bring the infinite God into our lives. God, the infinite, said, I'm going to grant you this formula. Okay, well, if you said it, and then it's important. So if you told me that it's important to take a citron on Sukkot and as part of a mitzvah, and that becomes a mitzvah and it's cosmic, I'll go find the citron. If Jewish law, the way it was taught to us, and because it's called a fruit of a beautiful tree, really there is the idea of making it even more beautiful mitzvah, making sure there's no scars and the pattern of growth is and so on. Then you know something, the more beautiful the mitzvah, the more clear the connection with the divine. Stand there with a loop. No skin off my back. Okay. 7b. The concept of limitation in the mitzvahs is that they determine how God's essence is drawn down. Now, there's the different details. It's a prescription, meaning that through performing the mitzvahs precisely as they should be performed, one draws down God's essence. In other words, how does one draw down God's essence? We have no idea, but by performing the mitzvahs in the prescribed manner, that's all we know. For it is God's will that his essence should be drawn down in this way, and that's what we follow. And here's something from the Rebbe, bringing it a little bit closer. The Rebbe was an engineer, bringing it to more contemporary language. Text 873. An engineer designs a machine using multiple parts. Among the various parts, some are more critical than others, and there are some that, to the average observer or the uneducated observer, may seem entirely unnecessary. But the engineer who designed the machine knows very well the purpose of every part, and how each part, even the tiniest screw, is critical to the overall function of the machine. So let's say someone comes along and says, why should I bother with the engineer's designs when building the machine? I'll do what makes sense to me. To my eyes, these little parts are unnecessary. The machine doesn't need them to function. I don't need this tiny screw. I may even add a different screw. It's quite obvious that this makes no sense. If the builder does not follow the engineer's design and does as he or she sees fit instead, the machine won't work. The only reason the builder feels that this little screw is unnecessary is because they have no appreciation whatsoever for the machine's design. They're not an engineer. They're not the creator. You have to read the instruction manual. This is a precise metaphor for creation and our mission to observe the mitzvahs. Just as every part of the machine is critical to its overall function, so is it with observing the mitzvahs. Our connection with God is fashioned specifically through the 630 mitzvahs of the Torah and 7 mitzvahs of the rabbis. Because the rabbis added on Hanukkah, Purim. I mean, we had a lot of different legislation, but they're generally supposed to say 7 mitzvahs of the rabbis. Shabbos counts as one of them, actually. So the idea is that the Torah is the manufacturer's manual, the user's manual. And for someone to come along and look at something like me, where at a computer and decide, who needs that? I'm not the person to understand who needs that. If it's here, it's probably necessary. And then I want to look into the manufacturer's manual, try to understand it, instead of just thinking that coming from the outside, I can figure it out better.
But
Yeah.
This analogy kind of breaks down in engineering.
Why?
Well, because, and if you look at the way machines evolve, right? People will look at a design and say, oh, well, we don't need 4 screws here, we only need 2.
Correct.
And it improves the design.
Okay, that's good. There it does break down. Here we're assuming that there's only one engineer who can really understand how to bring the infinite into the world.
Right. But who might have questioned, but like
Your question anyway.
we talk about the Esrog.
Yeah.
And it's not mentioned.
No.
In the Bible,
It's sort of a beautiful tree. Yeah.
So how do we get from a fruit to an esrog?
So when Moses taught that,
Right.
he thought, what does God mean by fruit of a beautiful tree? He means an esrog. And then he explained. We're just like when Moses taught, God says, slaughter this. This is what you have to slaughter things in a ritual way, and then he taught how, even though it doesn't say it. There's almost no mitzvah, or probably I should say no mitzvah, that is fully fleshed out in the Torah. It's all just a thumbnail sketch. So how do we get the details? We got the details either from Moses taught us. How do you know that tefillin is supposed to be black?
Right.
He told us black. Or he gave us what we call, similar to Rabbi compared it to Euclidean principles of geometry. Euclid didn't think of all the possible applications. His job was to come up with the principles, and then you can apply it. There's rabbinic, Moses gave us principles for how to apply the law and how to expound the law. So it's all based on Mosaic principles. So when a rabbi in Jerusalem is trying to figure out, how something in bioethics or in computer science and how it applies to Torah, to Torah law, we're not saying this rabbi made up the law. We're not saying that Moses knew about computers, but he's using Mosaic principles to apply it, to expound.
So I have a better analogy.
Go for it.
So I think of it as whenever if you're learning a skill, if you're learning to play an instrument or sport, right? Coach, teacher teaches you a certain way to do it. And then no, I can do it this way or that way. And the reason is because it's a fundamental skill.
Right.
So if you don't learn it the right way, you won't be able to continue. You won't be able to progress to the next level.
That I think that's a good analogy. Although one might come and say that really, a batting coach told me to do it this way, but it's working well my way.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're all very similar. The idea of being able to, having the humility to accept the prescription, because you want to call it a fundamental skill, but it's a combination lock. You know what I mean? It's something you do. You have to do it your way. Do it the right way. And I guess this is a continuation. Yeah, it's a continuation. When a Jew adds or subtracts a mitzvah, though it seems like a trivial matter, in truth, it undermines the entire relationship that's forged with Torah mitzvahs. Just as the absence of even one small screw will prevent the machine from working properly. Or, you know something? I'm going to come up with a much more pedestrian thing. What if my wife says, it's 11:30 at night. She says, I really need a pickle from downstairs. I need a pickle.
Okay.
And that's going to make me happy. I go downstairs and I bring up a tomato. Because pickles they don't agree with you well. I think you like the tomato one. Not smart. She's saying this is going to make me happy. I don't think what she's telling me. I'm going to get decide what's making her happy. She's giving me the prescription. God's saying this is how I'm going to be in your life. Say, nah, I'll tell you what. We don't need to do it that way. Why am I to say that? I can't control that. With my wife, at least I can convince her. God, I'm not convinced.
In my house, I get a pickled tomato.
Right, that would make sense. And I was going to say that ignoring my wife is a little more frightening than ignoring God, but it shouldn't be. Okay, text 9. Here is the Rabbi Moss's response that we brought earlier, I think text 2 or so. Answer: I never claimed to have all the answers. Remember this, if you want to, let's just go with it. For the sake of the question was, why does Jewish religion seem to obsess over insignificant details, the shoelaces, the spoon? And it says, you didn't answer my first one, so maybe you don't have the answer.
There's a mitzvah about shoelaces?
It's not a mitzvah, but there is guidance. Yeah. There's guidance and everything. And it doesn't come from OCD. It just comes from trying to do everything meaningfully. Answer: I never claimed to have all the answers. There are many questions that are beyond me, but it happens to be that I did answer your question, and you did get the answer. I sent a reply immediately. The fact that you didn't receive it is itself the answer to your question. What does he mean? You see, I sent you a reply, but I wrote your email address leaving out the dot before the comma. I figured you should still receive the mail. After all, it was only one little dot missing. I mean, come on. It's not as if I wrote the wrong name or something drastic like that. Would anyone be so nitpicky as to differentiate between Yahoo.com and Yahoo.com? Isn't it a bit ridiculous that you don't get my email just because of a little dot? So he's obviously making his point there that one of the things that computers and the internet has shown us is that a dot can make or a one letter can make a big difference in the website you're trying to reach, even though you're very close. No, it's not ridiculous because the dot is not just a dot. It represents something. That dot has meaning far beyond the pixels on the screen that form it. To me, it may seem insignificant, but that is simply due to my ignorance of the ways of the internet. All I know is that with the dot, the message gets to the right destination. Without it, the message is lost to oblivion. Jewish practices have infinite depth. Each nuance and detail contains a world of symbolism. Every dot counts. So now we're going to go back to to complete this, we're going to another thought of Rabbi Shalom Dober, the fifth Bab Rebbe, who we've been pursuing before. His thoughts is for this reason as well, that when one performs mitzvahs, they must accept the yoke of heaven, which means to nullify one's own desires and rationalizations and perform the mitzvahs strictly because they're God's desire. At the end of the day, it's the Shabbos candle and the tefillin is not about so much the candle and the animal hide. It's about doing what a loved one asked me to do. It's fulfilling God's desire. One internalizes this, they can perform mitzvahs with great enthusiasm, know that they're fulfilling God's desire. It's not about the details. You need to get into the details, but the big picture is about just you asked me to do something, I want to do it. I want to do it because it's a means of connection with you. One contemplates that mitzvahs are really God's innermost desire. The value of each mitzvah increases greatly in one's eyes, and they perform the mitzvah with great pleasure and enthusiasm. When a Jew performs mitzvahs in this way, by first accepting the yoke of heaven, then they can draw down God's essential desire. Now, here, to conclude, say text 11 is with the offerings that were brought in the temple. There's a language that is used as a pleasing aroma. It is what does that mean? What makes it a pleasing aroma? I don't think God cares about the actual smell. It is a spirit of satisfaction for me. Nachas ruach, which is similarly, it's verbally like reach nechach. Nachas ruach means it's a spirit of satisfaction that I commanded and my will was performed. The beautiful scent to me is the scent of you doing something for me. And our final text, 12a and b, is to explain the fact that mitzvahs were given to us in a limited manner is because the ultimate goal of a mitzvah is to unite the limited and limitless. It is specifically in this manner that God's essence, which transcends both limitation and limitlessness, is expressed. Therefore, it is only through God's self-limitation that we can achieve this. God says, I'm infinite, but I want to make myself accessible to the finite. So I'm not going to overwhelm them. I'm going to give them a formula through which they can have me, but it has to be a limited one. By God limiting the way we can access his limitlessness, we can achieve the unification of limitation and limitlessness, finite and infinite, which is possible only in God's essence. And this comes to something which we've mentioned many times, that the ultimate purpose of creation is for us to create a home for God in the physical realm. The idea of making a home for God in the physical realm contains both extremes. It's a place for the limitless presence of God to be at home, fully, just like a person is fully comfortable in their own. And the home is in this lowly, finite physical world, a home for God. A physical world. A home for God thus combines two extremes of limitation and limitlessness, the finite and the infinite. Going back to this guy with the loop. Focusing on the details of the mitzvah serves as a reminder of the awesome opportunity we have to unite limitation with infinity. Here's the key points. Just as it is forbidden to subtract from mitzvahs, it's forbidden to add to them because it's about the calculation, it's about the combination, not about the, what you decided is good. Details of mitzvahs are important. Number 3, it is God's will that his infinite light be drawn into the universe through the fulfillment of mitzvahs. Number 4, for reasons unfathomable to us, God desires that his infinite light be channeled only in a very specific way. If we perform mitzvahs as specified, we channel God's light. If we don't, we don't. Number 5, when we fulfill mitzvahs, we infuse limitation with limitlessness by assuming that, by accessing, a level that's higher than both. The bedrock of mitzvah fulfillment is accepting the yoke of heaven and desire to fulfill God's will. Okay. So, is there any questions?
Yes, Rabbi, I have one question.
Go ahead.
It seems like there is a distinction between the infinite light and the essence. So is it correctly understood that in order for the essence to actually get in and make the connection, first the light has to come through the limitations?
So there is a distinction between the essence and the light. And your question was that do we
seems
specifically
like
have to go through the limitation? Is that what you're saying?
Through the limitations, in order for the light to pass through and establish the like a bridge, there has to be a limitation, otherwise the essence doesn't get
For us, that's and in a way that specifically it's a little bit a whole new topic. But see, God, we talk about God as being infinite. God's beyond infinite and finite. God's God.
Right.
So the idea of connecting with God's essence means also getting past the bifurcation of infinite and finite. Where we in a finite world can connect with the infinite means we're connecting with God even beyond the infinite light. It's more there's God the luminary and God and then the light that comes to the light we usually speak about as being endless and infinite, but the luminary, God's essence, is we don't call it without end, we call it without beginning. It's beyond it all.
Right.
All right.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very
Hey,
much.
wait.
Thank you.
Might be interested in-